20 years have passed since World War II ended with the failure of the Allied invasion of Normandy. Hitler's triumphant forces declared victory over Europe and the British Empire, while the United States withdrew from the European conflict. In the East, only the Russians continued to fight a brutal guerrilla war. American efforts shifted toward avenging Pearl Harbor, which culminated in victory over Japan in the summer of 1945. General Eisenhower returned home from Europe, facing a humiliating retirement in 1947. King Edward and Queen Wallis ascended the British throne, while Winston Churchill, who barely survived the Normandy campaign, died in exile in Canada in May 1953. In the years following the war, the nations of old Europe were gradually absorbed into the vast Nazi empire of Germania. Albert Speer, the Führer's architect, constructed monumental works to celebrate the 1000th anniversary of the Reich. Berlin, now the capital of Germania, became a paradise for Nazis. Its SS transformed into a seemingly peaceful police force patrolling clean and orderly streets. By the late 1950s, Hitler succeeded in projecting a more civilized image of the Reich, even though news and information remained strictly controlled. In the early 1960s, the war with the Soviet Union dragged on. Desperate to end the conflict, Hitler sought a formal peace with the United States and an alliance against the Russians, still led by the aging Joseph Stalin, now 85 years old. Hope arose at the end of 1960 with the election of Joseph P. Kennedy as President of the United States. Hitler believed he had finally found a leader willing to negotiate. Now, in 1964, for the first time in 20 years, Germania's borders have been opened to Americans. The world press has been invited to attend the Führer's 75th birthday celebrations on April 20th, and rumors abound that President Kennedy himself will participate in a conference between American and German leaders. An alliance with America would secure Germania's invulnerability. Yet rumors circulate that could endanger Hitler's grand plans, stories suggesting something terrible happened in Germany during the war. Whispers claim that the official Nazi version of the resettlement of Jews and other minorities to the east is a lie, and suspicions grow that the Reich continues to commit atrocities. Television, radio, and newspapers remain tightly controlled by the Ministry of Information, and no one dares to ask questions about such sensitive matters. In a wooded area near Berlin, a young SS cadet named Hermann Jost witnesses several government men leaving something by the lakeside. After they depart, Hermann approaches and discovers a body floating in the water. Later, SS Major Xavier March in Berlin receives a call ordering him to investigate the discovery. Before leaving, Xavier spends some time at home with his son, Pili. Upon arriving at the scene, he is greeted by fellow officers who hand him Hermann Jost's written statement describing what he saw. Xavier consults Dr. Eisler, the coroner assigned to the case, but further details must await an autopsy. Meanwhile, American journalist Charlie Maguire arrives in Berlin as part of a guided tour, an initiative designed by Hitler to present a friendly image of Germania to the world. At the end of the tour, while in her hotel, an elderly man at the reception desk gives Charlie an envelope, claiming she dropped it. Back in Berlin, Xavier receives the coroner's report. The body from the lake is identified as Joseph Bühler, a prominent Nazi Party official during the war, who had been responsible for the so-called resettlement of the Jews. In her hotel room, Charlie opens the mysterious envelope. Inside, she finds a photograph showing several Nazi officers standing before a building. Alongside the photo is a note instructing her to contact Wilhelm Stuckart, one of the men in the picture. Meanwhile, Xavier returns to the lake where the body was found. He visits a nearby abandoned mansion. During his inspection, the house phone unexpectedly rings. Xavier answers, but the caller, asking for Joseph, hangs up abruptly after hearing his voice. Xavier then visits the SS Academy to question Hermann Jost, the cadet who discovered the body. During their conversation, Hermann reveals a crucial detail he omitted from his official report. One of the men he saw at the lake was Odilo Globoknik, the head of the Gestapo. Realizing the significance of this information, Xavier warns Hermann to keep it secret. Charlie, following the note's instructions, arrives at Wilhelm Stuckart's apartment, only to find him dead, along with a woman lying lifeless beside him. At the same time, Xavier meets with SS General Arthur Nebe. Nebe informs him that the Bühler case has been taken over by the Gestapo and orders him to close his investigation. As compensation, Nebe assigns Xavier to handle the newly discovered Stuttgart case, instructing him to interrogate the American woman who found the bodies. Following orders, Xavier goes to find Charlie, who is being held in an SS interrogation room to give a statement. He takes her to the building where Stuttgart and the woman were found dead. At the same time, concerned for Herman's safety, Xavier asks a fellow officer to place the young cadet in protective custody. Upon arrival, the doorman informs them that the Gestapo has forbidden access to the apartment. Xavier, however, uses his authority to demand the key. As they climb the stairs, Charlie notes that the current doorman is not the same one who greeted her previously. Xavier confirms that this was one of the reasons he brought her back to the scene. There are too many suspicious inconsistencies surrounding the case. Inside, Xavier begins questioning Charlie about Stuttgart. She claims she wanted to speak with him to obtain information about the rumored meeting between Hitler and President Kennedy. However, Xavier quickly realizes that she is lying. While the two are still inside the apartment, several Gestapo officers arrive by car and stop in front of the building. Sensing the danger, Xavier helps Charlie escape unnoticed. When confronted, he calmly insists that he was simply performing his duty by inspecting the premises. Elsewhere, Odilo Globoknik, the ruthless head of the Gestapo, pays an unexpected visit to General Arthur Nebe. The men exchange few words, but Globoknik's threatening tone suggests that he has serious, possibly hostile matters to discuss. The next day, Xavier accompanies General Nebe back to the mansion near the lake. Inside, Nebe leads him to a hidden compartment that reveals a secret room filled with authentic paintings by great masters. Nebe presents his theory. Joseph Bühler and Franz Luther had been using their political positions to smuggle valuable works of art. He suggests that, realizing the Gestapo was closing in, Stuttgart and Bühler took their own lives, and that Luther would likely do the same. Xavier, unconvinced by this explanation, reveals that he found Bühler's prosthetic leg during his earlier inspection of the mansion. He argues that Bühler could not have walked to the lake without it, making suicide impossible. Nebe's response is menacing. He warns Xavier that it is unwise to make enemies of both Globoknik and himself, advising him to leave the matter alone. That evening, Xavier spends time with his young son at an amusement park. The next day, back at work, he requests Herman's release, arguing that the case has been closed. To his shock, an officer informs him that Herman is dead. According to the official report, the cadet supposedly slipped and broke his neck during a gymnastics exercise the night before. Suspicious of this explanation, Xavier orders an autopsy. After examining the body, Dr. Eisler concludes that the injuries are consistent with a fall. Still, Xavier remains unconvinced. Later, he meets Charlie at an outdoor cafe. The Major offers her a deal. He will return her confiscated passport if she tells him the real reason for her presence in Germany. Charlie admits that she originally came to cover the upcoming meeting between Hitler and Kennedy, but during her stay, she stumbled upon something far more significant. She offers to share what she has discovered if Xavier agrees to help her investigate. Intrigued, Xavier returns her passport. Charlie then shows him the mysterious photograph that the elderly man had given her. Xavier does not recognize the officers in the image, but he identifies the building in the background as Wannsee. Following this lead, Xavier and Charlie travel to the site. They discover that the building now serves as a home for the blind. A caretaker named Franz explains that Reinhard Heydrich, a high-ranking Nazi officer, once conducted activities there, but no one knew exactly what they were. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Xavier decides to visit the Reich archives. There, he shows the old photograph to an archivist. After checking several records, the man informs Xavier that all the officers in the photo were high-ranking Nazi party members, and that, according to official reports, they had all been declared dead. This revelation deeply disturbs Xavier. Upon returning, he urges Charlie to leave Berlin immediately, warning her that the situation has become far too dangerous. He tells her that all the men in the photograph have died under mysterious circumstances, except one, Franz Luther. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Charlie receives a bouquet of flowers accompanied by a card. Inside is an invitation to meet at a train station, signed by Luther himself. On the train, Charlie realizes that the elderly man from the hotel is, in fact, Franz Luther. Unfortunately, a Nazi officer outside the train recognizes him and immediately alerts the authorities. Desperate, Luther begs Charlie to help him defect to the United States, promising to share the story of the century. In exchange, he reveals that he holds the greatest secret of the Second World War and that everyone else who knew about it has been systematically murdered by the Gestapo. Luther turns out to be the only surviving witness to the great secret. When the train arrives at the next station, he is recognized and immediately pursued by Nazi officers. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, Luther draws his gun but is shot dead during the confrontation. At that moment, Xavier also arrives at the station. Spotting Charlie, he is visibly furious with her for disobeying his warning to leave Berlin. Acting quickly, he takes her into his car and drives her away before the Gestapo can question her. Elsewhere, Odilo Globoknik visits General Nebe's office. Globoknik angrily complains that Luther was supposed to be captured alive. Nebe responds calmly, claiming that Luther was killed in self-defense. Globoknik is further alarmed by reports that an American journalist was seen with Luther, but Nebe feigns ignorance of the matter. Later, Charlie shows Xavier the documents that Luther gave her before his death. Among them are two photographs, one of Luther himself and another of an unknown woman. Meanwhile, the Reich Archives employee who previously assisted Xavier is interrogated by the Gestapo. Under pressure, she reveals everything she knows. The next day, Xavier and Charlie examine Luther's personal files, which an SS colleague managed to obtain. From these papers, they discover the address of the woman in the photograph. Charlie visits the residence and meets Anna, Luther's secret lover. Anna, expecting the arrival of an American woman, is not surprised by Charlie's appearance. She immediately asks where Luther is, and Charlie lies, saying that he is at the American embassy arranging his travel documents. Trusting her, Anna hands over the documents meant for Luther. She then begins to daydream about her own future in the United States, saying that the only thing left behind in Germany would be the Jews. Moments later, Anna reveals the horrifying truth that there was never any resettlement of Jews. In reality, the Nazis exterminated them en masse during the war. Men like Stuckart helped conceal these crimes under layers of propaganda and deception. Horrified by this revelation, Charlie rushes out of the house, claiming that a car will pick her up later. As she runs through the streets, Xavier follows her, confused by her behavior. He finally catches up with her in a nearby park, where she shows him the documents. Xavier is visibly shaken as he reads the evidence of the atrocities committed by his own government. Charlie explains that the officers in the Wannsee photograph were the architects of these crimes, and that by eliminating them, the regime ensured that no one could expose the horrors, leaving Hitler free to negotiate peacefully with President Kennedy. Seeing Xavier's anguish, Charlie urges him to come with her to the United States, bringing his son as a way to escape the oppressive Nazi regime. That night, Xavier calls his ex-wife and convinces her to meet him at his apartment. It is a diversion, allowing him to break into her home and take his son, Pili, with him. Meanwhile, Charlie attends the grand ceremony where the Führer and President Kennedy are scheduled to meet before a massive crowd. There, she encounters a fellow journalist and discreetly hands him the incriminating documents, asking him to ensure they reach the American president in time. Moments later, Hitler enters the Great Hall. At the same time, Xavier discovers that his son has reported him to the Gestapo, believing his father to be ill and in need of help. Globoknik and his officers arrive at Xavier's home. Xavier manages to escape through the back, killing a Gestapo agent in the process but suffering a mortal wound. Despite his injury, he remains conscious long enough to flee on a bicycle. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, Charlie's colleague succeeds in delivering the compromising documents to the American ambassador, who rushes them to President Kennedy's car. Upon seeing the shocking images of the genocide committed against the Jews, the president immediately abandons the event and departs with his entourage. Moments later, Charlie arrives at the park where she and Xavier had agreed to meet. As she waits, Xavier, barely alive, stops at a phone booth and calls his son. He tells Peely that what has happened is not his fault, encouraging him to be strong and independent, never allowing others to manipulate him. After the call, Xavier collapses and slowly dies. It is then revealed that the film's narrator is Peely himself, now an adult. He explains that Charlie waited in the park, even though she had the chance to flee, until the Gestapo eventually found her. Peely concludes that without the alliance with America, Hitler's government ultimately collapsed, bringing an end to the Reich. He fondly recalls the lessons his father taught him, expressing pride in following in Xavier's footsteps. This is the end if you got this far. Comment the secret word, which is potato with cheddar, to help an unemployed person. Subscribe and like. Until next time, bye-bye.